You ordered exactly what you wanted. You picked it deliberately, off a menu you studied like it was a final exam. It arrives. It looks fine. You are happy, and then their food arrives. And suddenly yours looks completely wrong. Their fries are crispier. Their sauce is more generous. Their plate just has better energy somehow. And now you cannot stop staring at it, even though you ordered the same thing last week and loved it. This is not a character flaw, and it is definitely not you being dramatic. This is your brain running a very specific psychological program, one that researchers have studied in labs, traced to evolutionary wiring, and confirmed to be universal across cultures. It happens with home cooking, with office lunches, with a bag of crisps during a movie, with literally any food situation involving another human being. The friend who orders first and gets their food before you looks like they made the better choice every single time. And once you understand why this is happening, you will never look at someone else's plate the same way again. But it will, unfortunately, still happen anyway. Here is what happens every time you cook for yourself. You smell the onions going in. You smell the garlic. You watch the sauce reduce. You taste test twice. You adjust the seasoning and taste again. By the time the plate is in front of you, your brain has already been processing the smell and anticipation of that food for 30 to 45 minutes. And here is the problem with that. Your brain does not cleanly separate the experience of smelling food from the experience of eating it. A phenomenon called sensory-specific satiety describes exactly this. It was first documented in 1956 by French physiologist Jacques Lemonnier and formally named in 1981 by researchers Barbara and Edmund Rolls at Oxford University. The basic finding is this: the more exposure you have had to a food, the less pleasurable it becomes, in relative terms, compared to foods you have had no exposure to. A buffet works on this principle in the opposite direction. The variety of new foods constantly renews appetite because each one is unfamiliar to your system. And the exposure that drives satiety does not have to be eating, smelling a dish cooking, watching it being prepared, repeatedly imagining its taste. All of these begin to reduce the hedonic value of that food before you have taken a single bite. Your ceiling drops with every whiff. A 2010 study published in the journal Science by Carrie Morewedge and colleagues at Carnegie Mellon University confirmed just how powerful this effect is. Participants who imagined eating 33 chocolate candies one at a time subsequently ate significantly fewer actual candies than participants who imagined eating only 3. The repeated imagining itself was enough to reduce appetite. Morewedge described the mechanism as habituation, the same process that makes the first bite of chocolate more exciting than the 15th. When you cook your own meal, you are completing mental bites before the food ever reaches the table. The person eating your cooking has had none of that exposure. They walked in, they sat down, the plate appeared. Their sensory-specific satiety clock for that dish is at 0. Your clock has been running for the entire time you spent in the kitchen. This is the most direct explanation for why a meal you cooked tastes better to your guests than it does to you, and why restaurant food often tastes more exciting than the identical recipe you make at home. The kitchen is in the back. You did not watch it happen. Your brain is arriving fresh. But sensory-specific satiety does not explain everything, because the food envy effect is not only about who cooked it. It also happens when two people order the exact same dish, sit down at the same time, and one person's plate still looks better. No cooking exposure difference, identical dishes. And yet, the pull toward the other plate is real. Something else is operating here, and researchers at Yale found it in 2014. A study published in the journal Psychological Science recruited 23 participants and gave them a task that would qualify as one of the more enjoyable scientific obligations in academic history: eat chocolate. Participants ate chocolate both alongside a Confederate who was also eating, and separately while the Confederate was doing an unrelated task. The result was striking. When the chocolate was eaten as a shared experience, participants consistently rated it as more pleasurable and better tasting than when they ate it alone. Sharing an experience with another person increases the intensity of attention to that stimulus. In plain English, eating with someone else makes you pay more attention to what you are eating, and more attention means a more vivid experience. Think about watching a film in a packed cinema versus watching the same film alone on a laptop. The crowd reaction amplifies everything. The same scene hits harder with people around you responding to it. Food works the same way. Your brain is generating a comparison that heightens awareness of both plates simultaneously, and that heightened awareness amplifies the appeal of the one you do not have. The scale of this effect on eating behavior is enormous. Research has shown that people eat up to 48% more food when they dine with close friends and family than when they eat alone. The effect is specific. A 2019 meta-analysis of 42 studies led by the University of Birmingham found no significant social facilitation when people ate with strangers, only with people they knew well. Eating with 4 close friends rather than eating alone can nearly double how much you consume, with no change in hunger, no change in food quality, nothing but the familiarity of the people at the table. The evolutionary explanation is that communal eating once signaled safety and abundance. Your ancient brain, which spent most of human history uncertain when the next meal was coming, has not updated its settings for the modern restaurant menu. And there is a third layer, the most purely psychological of all. The food on someone else's plate is food you cannot have without asking permission. And things we cannot have freely tend to seem more desirable than identical things we already own. Psychologists call this the scarcity effect. It applies to everything from limited edition trainers to fries off a friend's plate. The brief inaccessibility of the food, the small social friction required to reach for it, the fact that it is technically not yours. All of it raises the perceived value of those particular fries above whatever is sitting on your own plate. The moment you steal one and it lands in your mouth, it tastes better than yours. Studies on shared eating confirm this holds, even when the food is objectively identical. There is also something worth noting about the stolen fry specifically. The act of taking it is slightly transgressive, and mild transgression produces a small dopamine signal that arrives at almost the same moment as the taste. You are not just eating the fry, you are eating the fry, plus a tiny chemical reward for getting away with something. Here is where it gets commercially interesting. The restaurant industry figured out most of this before the research confirmed it, the same way poker players understand probability before they learn the mathematics. Open kitchens are one example. A restaurant that lets diners watch food being prepared is doing something very specific to your psychology. It removes the pre-satiation advantage that a closed kitchen gives by keeping you at zero exposure, but it replaces that with something more powerful: anticipation. Watching food being cooked for someone else, or watching your own food being assembled by someone else's hands, triggers the scarcity effect and raises the social salience of the dish. The food is not yours yet. It is being made, not delivered. Your brain is treating it as temporarily inaccessible, and that brief inaccessibility runs the same psychological script as reaching for fries off a friend's plate. The industry understood this long before the papers were published. The dramatic plate delivery is an even more direct exploitation. When a server walks a sizzling iron skillet of fajitas through a full dining room, every person who watches it pass experiences a brief version of the food envy effect. The food is visually highlighted, socially signaled as desirable by the attention it draws, and rendered temporarily inaccessible to everyone who is not the table receiving it. Research on sensory attention and food desirability confirms that visual salience increases perceived taste quality before a single bite is taken. The restaurant is doing the psychological work before the food touches your table. Food styling and photography exploit the same mechanisms at scale. The reason food in advertisements looks almost aggressively more appetizing than real food is partly production technique, but largely psychological. Carefully plated food with high visual contrast and deliberate garnishing triggers the brain's expectation bias, the same cognitive system that causes us to rate the taste of food higher when it looks premium before we eat it. Brain imaging research in sensory science has shown that visual processing of food begins influencing taste expectation before the food enters the mouth. You are already tasting it with your eyes, and the industry has spent decades engineering what your eyes see. The next time you are sitting at a restaurant convinced that your friend's plate is better than yours, here is what is actually happening. Your brain has pre-processed your own order through anticipation and repeated mental sampling. Their food arrived with no baggage attached. The shared social setting has heightened your attention to everything on the table simultaneously. The brief inaccessibility of their plate has applied a scarcity premium to it. And if you are the kind of person who spent 20 minutes deliberating over the menu, your brain has already imagined eating your dish enough times to start running a mild habituation effect before the food even left the kitchen. None of those are character flaws. All of them are well-documented psychological mechanisms, confirmed in labs, traced through evolutionary biology, and monetized by every serious restaurant designer on Earth. The science does leave one unanswered question. If you fully understand all of this, if you know about sensory-specific satiety and shared attention and the scarcity effect, does your food finally taste as good as theirs? Almost certainly not. Knowing the trick does not make the trick stop working, which is, honestly, reassuring for the restaurant industry and mildly humbling for everyone else. If this one made you hungry, give it a like and subscribe to Fact Found TV. We cover one piece of everyday psychology or science every week. Tell us in the comments what you want us to cover next.